I met Mary and Estella Burns my senior year of college. She wasn't a fellow student of mine. She worked as a waitress at an off-campus pizza place that my friends and I visited about once every 2 weeks. George, Sam, Mike, and I stopped by Stell's on the second day of work. It was pretty corny of me, but when she let us know right away that she preferred Stell to Stella or Estella, asked us to order, I said, "A large serving of pepperoni, a pitcher of corlite, and an invitation to go out with you." She looked in her notebook, writing down the order, and when she was done, she looked at me and said, "I have Wednesday and Thursday off. Which one do you want?" "Can't I have both?" "I guess it would depend on how the first one goes." The first went very well, as did all the subsequent ones, especially after the 8th, when we made love for the first time. Stell was a junior in high school when she had to drop out because her financial support ended when her parents died in a car accident. I learned the whole story on our 5th date. I asked her if she had enough insurance to help. If they had any money, I don't know about it. No one ever called me about it. I know they had money in the bank, but the bank wouldn't let me have it because the account doesn't have my name on it, and I wasn't legally entitled to it. "Didn't you hire a lawyer?" "I don't have money for a lawyer." "Well, maybe fate decided we found each other to help you. It just so happens that my Uncle Dan is a lawyer and I can get a family discount." To make a long story short, not only did Uncle Dan get her bank funds returned to her, but he also found out that her father had a safe deposit box, and when they opened it, they found a $100,000 life insurance policy in there that had a double accidental death clause, and she was named as the beneficiary. There were also documents that showed that both her mother and father had life insurance as part of the Social Security package where they worked. $10,000 for her father and $5,000 for her mother, and both of those policies paid double the amount for accidental death, and she was listed as a secondary beneficiary. In 3 weeks, she had gone from a penniless former student to a young lady with over $225,000 in her bank account. I asked Stell to marry me when I graduated, and she said yes, but only after she got her degree and found a job. When I graduated, I had a job. It was with the company I had interned for the previous 2 summers, so I had pretty much settled in when I moved to full-time work. The job paid well, and I had some savings, including the $10,000 my parents had given me for graduation, so I had enough for a down payment, and I bought a house. I built it ranch-style with 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, and a big backyard. There was a fairly large patio with a hot tub off to the side. When Stell first saw it, she got mad at me for not letting her in on the deal. With the money I have from insurance, we could have made a bigger down payment and maybe even paid all at once. If we were married, I would, but we're not. But we are going to be. But not until you graduate and get a job, and that's at least 1.5 years away. A lot can happen in that time. What's your point? You'll meet new people, and you might meet someone who interests you, and you might want to see if you have something interesting to offer. When you start working, maybe someone will take an interest in you. Like I said, anything can happen in that time. You don't trust me. I have my doubts. You won't marry me until you graduate, although marriage won't affect your ability to go to school in any way, and you won't even move in with me until then. I've explained everything to you. Yes, and I understand your reasoning, but that in itself is enough to cause me to question it. Wanting a fulfilling college experience means meeting new people, trying new things, and anything can happen along the way. In fact, it's already happened. Twice in the past 2 weeks, you've turned me down for a date because you were going to do something with some of the girls you've been dating. It goes without saying that when girls go out, guys also go to try to meet those girls, and sometimes something happens. What can I do to convince you that you're the right man for me? That's something you'll have to deal with on your own. Shortly after this conversation, I asked her what she would like to do this coming Friday, and heard that she had already made a date for that evening. But I'm free on Saturday. That's not going to work. I already have a date for Saturday. Bye. And I hung up. I didn't really have a date for Saturday night, but I was glad I told her that. What I did have planned for Saturday was a barbecue. I invited all my new neighbors over to get to know each other better. The invitation I sent out said, from 2 o'clock to any other time, and it could last into the evening. Half an hour later, I got a call from Stell. I need an explanation, and I interrupted her by saying, I'm not interested in any explanation. You're free to do whatever you want. I'm asking you to at least not wear my wedding ring when you date another man. Have fun. Bye. And I hung up. She didn't call back. The barbecue, in my opinion, was a success. I got to know my neighbors, and they got to know me. They asked me a couple times why a single guy with no kids would want a 4-bedroom house. I explained that I had a fiancé and we were going to fill the bedrooms with kids once we got married. Then, of course, I was asked why she wasn't at the barbecue, and I explained that she was a college student and had things to do that she couldn't pass up. On Sunday, Stell showed up around noon. About 15 minutes after she arrived, she asked how my date went, and I said we ate and talked a lot, and that's all I said. She didn't bother to ask, but I realized she wanted more than I gave her. I didn't ask her about the date, and I couldn't tell if she was relieved or disappointed that I didn't. The topic was closed. We spent the rest of the day talking about what needed to be done to the house and what we wanted to do. Stell wanted to take advantage of the big backyard and put in a pool. I said that was something we could do when we saved up some money, and she reminded me that when she got married she would have lots of money. I didn't say anything to that. I took no action when it came to making love. I left that to her discretion, and she made no attempt to start a relationship. At 8 o'clock, she left for her place, and I didn't see her on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, but I didn't expect her to. I remembered all the nights I had to study late or spend time after class in the library looking for the materials I needed. I called her on Thursday and asked her what she would like to do on Friday, and she said she already had a date for Friday. I wished her to have fun and hung up. Stell didn't know it, but all these dates she went on ended up at home sooner or later. On Friday, after coming home from work, I went in for a drink with my coworkers, and it was already 9 o'clock when I got home. When I got there, Stell's car was parked in the driveway. When I went inside, I found Stell in the bedroom hanging clothes in the closet. She turned around, looked at me, and said, "A while ago I asked you what I needed to do to show you that you were the man I wanted. You said I needed to figure it out for myself. I decided the best way to show you that was to move in with you, and that's exactly what I'm doing." In my opinion, it was a step in the right direction. We had gotten used to a very comfortable routine. There were times when she couldn't get home for dinner because of study circles or group projects, but I didn't do anything like that while I was in school. My job sometimes required me to go out of town overnight, and twice when I called home in the evening to let Stell know where I was staying and how to reach me, my calls went to the answering machine at home and to voicemail when I called her cell phone. When I asked her where she was on these occasions, she said she was out drinking with a couple of her girlfriends. That seemed reasonable to me. I mean, why stay home alone when you can spend time with your friends? I did that when I was in high school, so why shouldn't she do the same? Sometimes I wondered if she was seeing other guys, but I had a lot of single friends who went to all the hot spots, and I was sure they would have let me know if she was seeing guys. And she spoiled me terribly as far as her personal life was concerned. 4 or 5 times a week, and usually both days on the weekend. Everything was going great until the condom broke and we had to get married. Stell was 4 months pregnant when she walked across the stage to receive her diploma. And no, Bobby wasn't stupid. I did the DNA test, without Stell's knowledge, as soon as Christine was discharged home from the hospital, and she was mine. I know I said I trusted Stell, but as one of our former presidents said, trust but verify. Due to complications from Christy's birth, Stell was unable to have any more children, something that subsequently affected our marriage. For the next 5 years, our marriage continued happily, and once Christy went to school, Stell found a job and moved on. I really didn't want her to go to work, but as Stell pointed out, when Christy is in school and there are no younger children in the house for her to take care of, she goes crazy and has nothing to occupy herself, so I relented. Her first year on the job didn't cause any problems, but then she was promoted and moved to another department, and I got shortly after that. The girls I work with want me to go to their place for drinks after work. It's Wednesday, so you'll have to take care of dinner for you and Christy. What bothered me most in that moment was that there was no, "Would you mind if I," or even, "Would you mind if..." I was basically told outright that she would do it whether I liked it or not. I had the good sense not to make a fuss about it, but I wasn't happy. The first few weeks she came home at 6:45, then it was 7:15, and then 8:15. It bothered me a bit, and I grumbled about it, which of course led to some coldness in the bedroom for a while, but at the time I was too busy to dwell on it since I had just been promoted. Fred Bascom had died, and I had been transferred to take his place. Fred had been in charge of several projects, and most of the information on those projects was in his head, not on paper or in his work computer, and died with him. As a result, I struggled to combine projects and meet deadlines. The job also involved travel. The trips were short, mostly one night, sometimes two. By the time this happened, I had made 12 trips. Stell usually left for work about an hour before me, so I had to walk Christy to school. I was in the bedroom and Christy was there with me. She was chatting non-stop about all the friends in her class. I had a meeting with a new client, and I wanted to dress appropriately for an aspiring executive. I was going through my ties, trying to pick one that would go well with the suit I was wearing, when Christy said, "My mom has the same problem. She doesn't know what dress to wear on a date." That got my attention, so I asked, "When does Mom go on dates?" "When you go out of town." "Does Mom go on dates every time I go out of town?" "Not always, but most of the time." "Does Mom's beau pick her up here?" "Sometimes." "Does she bring them home with her?" "I don't know, because when she comes home, I'm mostly in bed." "Who looks after you when Mom goes out on dates?" "Angie. Sometimes Katie." Those were the names of two teenage girls who lived in the neighborhood. I used them both as babysitters when I took Stell to dinner and dances, something I was probably never going to do again. I wasn't going to argue with Stell, relying on the word of a 7-year-old. Not that I doubted what Christy had told me, but I needed hard evidence. After calling a couple detective agencies, I learned that the cost of a private investigator was beyond what I could afford, so I would have to do it myself. Although I really questioned that decision after paying for 2 nights in a hotel and an Avis rental for 2 days. I told Stell I had a 2-day trip to Chicago, packed my bag, and carried it to my car as I drove to work in the morning. I left work early and parked at the rental place from where I could see Stell's car. When she got home from work, I walked her home. I parked a block away from her and waited to see what would happen next. About 20 minutes after we arrived, Angie Larson went to the front door and rang the bell. The door opened and she entered the house. 10 minutes later, a car stopped in front of the house. Stell came out of the house and got in it, and she drove off, and I followed her. The car pulled into the parking lot of the Alhambra Hotel, and when they got out of the car, I saw that there was another woman driving. I wasn't prepared for this. I figured following them that Stell was with another guy and they were probably headed to a motel or something. I couldn't go into the living room to see what was going on because I didn't have anything with me for disguise. All I could do was sit and wait for her to come out so I could see what she would do. That turned out to be a mistake. She came out with another woman at 10:30 and went home. I went back to the hotel and tried to make sense of what I had just seen. The next day at lunchtime, I went shopping. I bought a wig and a false beard at a specialty store. I bought horn-rimmed sunglasses and took the lenses out. That evening, I was able to follow Stell again as she was coming home from work. She drove home again. Angie showed up. But this time, Stell got out, got in her car, and drove away. I followed her to the Meadows neighborhood, and she stopped in front of a house. A woman came out of it, got in her car, and they drove off. It wasn't the same woman Stell had been with last night. Once again, they ended up at the Alhambra. I gave them 5 minutes to go inside and get their bearings, and then I changed my clothes and went inside. I knew the Alhambra, and knew that the bar area was dimly lit, unlike the area around the bandstand and dance floor. My disguise was trivial, and I counted on it working in the dimly lit bar. If Stell saw me, recognized me, and wanted to know what I was up to, I'd just tell her the truth. I know that if I was willing to do that, why didn't I just confront her face to face? And not tell her that I thought she was cheating on me based on what a 7-year-old told me. That would have changed our relationship in ways I couldn't even imagine. No proof? Just a comment from a 7-year-old? No, thank you. If there was going to be a confrontation, it would only be if I had hard evidence. I took a seat at the far end of the bar so I could be as far away from the dance floor as possible but still see the dance floor. Stell and the woman she picked up were sitting at a table, actually 2 tables pushed together, with 4 other women. At 6:45, the orchestra came in, took their seats, and at 7 they started playing. The men started coming up to the table and asking the ladies to dance, and the ladies got up and went out on the dance floor. Stell never danced with any one man in particular, and all of her dances were clean and casual. There was no touching, although one guy's hand slowly slid to her ass, but she didn't tolerate it. She stepped away from him and left him standing in the middle of the dance floor. Around 10 to 9, the ladies started to pack their purses to leave, so I got up and went to my rental car. Stell and her friend came out and got into Stell's car, and they drove out of the parking lot. I followed Stell as she drove the woman home, dropped her off, and headed back to our house. Sitting in the rental car, I called myself a dumbass for ever doubting my wife. She wasn't cheating. It was just a bachelorette party. But I was just a little curious, so one night I told Stell about what Christy had told me. It makes me curious. You dress up to go on dates, and sometimes someone picks you up right at home. Do I have anything to worry about? Not really. I took advantage of your absence to meet some of the girls I work with. What about the guy who's giving you a ride? It's not a guy giving me a ride. It's one of the girls. We have a certain rotation of drivers. That explained what I was seeing, but I was back to bad thoughts again. When I mentioned the word dating, Stell went pale. Why on earth would that happen? My thoughts? Okay, if she wasn't doing it in the evenings, she must have been doing it at other times. And the one thing I couldn't explain was her work hours. This led me to long lunch breaks. 2 days later, I was back in my rental car and could see Stahl's car in her company's parking lot. I got there a half hour before her usual lunch break. I knew what her usual lunchtime was because I had taken her to lunch several times. It was a good thing I got there early because instead of noon, she came out at 11:45. She got in her car, drove out of the parking lot, and headed west toward the motel. As I drove after her, I asked myself why she was cheating on me. What did I do or not do that caused this? My musings were interrupted when the left turn signal came on. Throwing a quick glance to my left, I saw Best Western. Stell turned left, but instead of turning left into the motel parking lot, she turned right toward the Village Inn, which was next to the Best Western. I sat in my car and watched the entrance to the restaurant until Stell got out and then followed her back to work. As she entered the building, I cursed myself for being such a suspicious fool. I stayed late to see if she left work early, but she got out at the usual time and went straight home. But I had rented an apartment for 3 days, so, more to punish myself than anything else, I spent the next 2 days sitting outside her workplace in the rental car, bored to tears. She never left the building at lunchtime and never left early. I turned in my apartment and hurried home. When I got there, Stell was cooking dinner. After eating, I played with Christy until she went to bed, and then Stell and I sat snuggled together on the couch and watched TV until we went to bed. When I came out of the bathroom, I found a naked Stell on the bed with a smile on her face. I asked myself how I could have ever doubted this woman in the first place. Months went by, but there is this thing called human nature, and it affects us all in one way or another. In my case, Christy had planted suspicions in me, and they went nowhere. It might not have taken root in my mind, but in one corner of my brain it had been deposited in the way Stell had behaved before we were married. That and what Christy had told me combined and grew. I was always looking for signs that Stell was cheating on me, but I never saw any. It was a 2-day trip and I wasn't supposed to be home until Friday night, but we finished our business by Thursday night. I was able to get an early morning flight on Friday and was home early enough to stop by Stell's house and take her out to lunch. I didn't see Stell's car in the parking lot, so I went inside and asked the receptionist to page Stell. Imagine my surprise when I was told that Stell doesn't work Fridays and that she had switched to a 4-day work week about 6 months ago. I left wondering what Stell was doing on these work-free Fridays that I knew nothing about. I kept my cool and pretended to be fat, dumb, and happy. I was neither fat nor happy, but dumb sure suited me. And everything was going fine. But the next Friday found me back in my rental car parked just down the street from our house. Stell got out a little after 9, and I followed her to 1496 Windsong Drive. I recognized the place. I'd been there half a dozen times for barbecues and parties. It belonged to Harvey Forbes. Harvey owned the business where Stell worked. Harvey wasn't her boss. Her boss was Dave Wisner. Dave was 3 or 4 rungs below Harvey in the management hierarchy. She left the house at 5:30, and I followed her to King Soopers, where I assumed she was going to buy whatever she was going to make for dinner that night. She didn't have time for anything else, and she beat me to it. So I gave up the chase, rented a car, and then stopped at Bud's bar for a beer before heading home at the usual time. After dinner, we sat Christy down in front of the TV to watch Dora the Explorer while we did the dishes ourselves. I washed and wiped the dishes. Holding out a plate to her, I asked, "How long and why?" "What? How long and why? How long and why what? How long did you cheat on me with Harvey Forbes and why? Are you out of your mind? Spare me the outrage, okay? Last Friday, I came home early and stopped by to take you to lunch, only to find out you no longer work Fridays. There was something you forgot to tell me. Naturally, I was curious to see what you do on your free Fridays, so I followed you to Harvey's this morning, sat outside, and watched you until you left at 5:30. So, back to my question. How long and why?" She stood with her plate in her hand and stared at the sink for a few seconds, then said, "7 months, and because I wanted it." "Is this what you wanted?" "I wanted something interesting to happen in my life. Before I met you, I had a dozen guys. Even after I met you, I had a couple hobbies. I liked to make love to different guys. They were all different heights, different shapes, different ways of making love. Then we got married, and all these years I stayed faithful to you. I've seen and met a lot of guys who kept me guessing what they'd be like in bed, but I just watched and wondered. It was my company Christmas party. You told me I could have fun and that you would be the driver for the night. By 2/3 of the party, I was in a pretty good mood. I went to the restroom, and when I came out, Harvey was just coming out of the men's room, saw me and said I looked pretty good that night, and then told me that if I wasn't married, he'd throw me over his shoulder and carry me back to his cave. I knew he was just flirting, and I think I surprised him when I told him that my being married wouldn't stop him. He didn't say a word, just held out his hand to me. I took it, and he led me down the hall to an empty office. He fucked me on the desk, and when it was over, he said he wanted more than quick sex, and I asked him to let me know where and when. He said he would contact me about it, and we went back to the party. I felt so horny that I damn near killed you when we got home. I slept with you 5 times that night, more than ever, and I still wanted more. I couldn't leave you alone that weekend. Do you remember?" I did, and I wondered what had gotten into her. She continued her story. On Monday, Harvey asked me to stop by his office and asked if I meant it when I said when and where. To be honest, I didn't mean it. It was just something I said hastily, but when I stood in front of his desk and saw the look of desire on his face, it changed something in me, and I told him I wasn't kidding. He told me to lock the door, and then we had fun on his desk. Afterward, he asked me to take one of the new 4-day positions that were opening up so we could spend the whole day together. She sighed and said, "While it lasted, it was fun. You sound like you're going to leave old Harvey." "Now that you know, I'm going to have to do it." "Why?" "Why what? Why are you stopping just because I know?" "What? You'd let me spend Friday with Harvey?" "I wouldn't let you do anything. It's your choice who you sleep with. It doesn't matter to me at all." "Oh, wow. I didn't see that coming. If someone had told me you wouldn't mind me seeing other men, I would have laughed at them. You really wouldn't mind?" "Why should I mind? It's your body, not mine. I can't tell you what you can and can't do with it. What I can tell you is that since you saw fit to give it to someone else, I don't need it anymore." "What do you mean by that?" "Just what I said. When you said yes, you gave yourself exclusively to me. Giving yourself to Mr. Forbes means you are no longer mine alone, and as for my wife, I share nothing with her. You are no longer mine. You belong to Harvey now, or whoever else you decide to give yourself to. When we've done the dishes, I'll move my things into the guest bedroom." "Why? What I did didn't hurt us in any way. I give you so much, but sometimes you push me away. I'm still madly in love with you. Having a little sex on the side hasn't diminished my affection for you." "Maybe not, but it's definitely made me feel less for you." "That hurts." "I think you're overreacting." "I'm no longer interested in what you think. I operate on facts, not thoughts. Fact 1, you cheated on me and I found out. Fact 2, I can't maintain a relationship with someone I can't trust, and by cheating on me, you prove that I can't trust you. Fact 3, the divorce laws in this state are anti-male, so if I file for divorce, I will find myself penniless and living in a tent somewhere in the woods with limited dating. This set of circumstances is unacceptable to me, so there will be no divorce. Instead, I will move all of my belongings into the guest bedroom, and life in this house will continue as before, except that there will be no sexual relations between you and me. Your sexual needs can be taken care of by Mr. Forbes. Having said that, I left her in the kitchen and headed for the guest bedroom. After about 5 minutes, she appeared in the hall and watched me silently. After a little while, she said, "What can I do to make you change your mind? I love you and you know it. I don't want you to. I need you in my bed so I can make love to you." "What can you do? Go back in time to before you got involved with Forbes and don't do this." "Damn it, Bob! Can't you realize I want you, not Forbes? I love you and I make love to you half a dozen times a week. Don't do this to me." "Because you love me? Or maybe it's just guilt sex, so you don't feel guilty for stabbing me in the back?" Don't bullshit me. Long before Harvey, I'd been pushing you to make love to me so often that sometimes you'd push me away. That was then, and this is now. Okay, chuckles. Then how about I play dirty? What? There's no way I can sleep across from you and want to kick down your door and jump on your bones, so I have to move out. And if I do that, I might as well file for divorce. On what grounds? I don't need grounds. This is a no-fault state. You know what's going to happen. You just said so yourself. You're going to live in a tent somewhere and maybe see Christy once a month or so. The courts will grant you visitation rights, but you'll have to contact me to make arrangements, and no doubt I'll be hard to reach at times. On the other hand, you'll only have to pay child support until I remarry, and I'm sure Harvey would jump at the chance to put a ring on my finger. He's always wanted kids, but he can't have kids because he's infertile. He's always been jealous that we have Christy. I think he would be a great stepfather to Christy. You wouldn't? You want to bet? I'll make it easy for you. You don't have to come back to our bedroom. All you have to do is go through the hall and sleep at least 5 times a week, and your first visit should be tonight. As a bonus, I'll stop seeing Harvey. I'll leave the lights on for you," she said as she headed into the living room. She had me and she knew it. I knew her too well. When she got herself worked up about something, nothing could stop her from going full speed ahead. For me, it was a case of you're damned if you do and damned if you don't, all because of a word spoken into my ear by a 7-year-old. Sparkle.